The more that I have been alive on this planet, the more I have seen how incredibly influential capital is to shape the world in so many different ways. That really what capital is fundamentally the ability to direct creativity and resources in one direction or another. One of the dreams that we have in starting Eventide is this concept of enlarging the common good and thinking about how the enlargement of the common good can also be a platform for the redemptive good. We're trying to show the world what it can look like if people actually love one another and do that in a systematic, comprehensive, business-centered way. That gives us the ability to now be, at least in some way, the city on a hill that Jesus wants us to be.
Proverbs chapter 11, it says, when the righteous prosper, the city rejoices. But when the wicked prosper, the people groan. Proverbs also says, when the righteous prosper, the city rejoices. And when the wicked are defeated, there are shouts of joy. The righteous are people that prosper by taking care of their cities, by uplifting the poor. And as they prosper, they continue to uplift the poor. Whereas the wicked are people that often prosper through exploitation. As the wicked are prospering, the people are groaning because the wicked are people that are hurting the poor in the city. So we want to partner with companies that are uplifting their communities and the whole of society.
So in February 2021, in our normal course of business, we were analyzing companies in the solar and clean energy space, and we started to see headlines linking forced labor in China to some solar companies, and that really caused immediate alarm. And we did about 3 months of research, intensive research, across the spectrum from the solar supply chain to the greater context of oppression of the Uyghur people in Xinjiang in China. And we began to really engage the industry, starting with companies, starting with CEOs and leaders. The industry really wasn't aware of this. And further, they certainly didn't have a solution. And so what we wanted to do was lend our voice as investors to this critical resource, solar energy, this critical technology, and educate the market on, one, here's how forced labor is wrapped into the supply chain. Two, here's the broader context of oppression. We wanted to appeal to people so that they would really understand that this isn't sort of a traditional forced labor situation. It's instituted by the government that is massive in scale. And then three, provide a solution. So we've developed a market-based solution that transitions the supply chain away from forced labor, starting with companies that you would buy from if you wanted to buy a solar panel, and then gradually working all the way down to the raw materials.
The thesis of Eventide is that investing is ownership, and that ownership confers ethical responsibility to the owner for the actions of the company. And so we therefore want to avoid things that are harming individuals. We want to avoid activities that are taking advantage of people. And then we want to celebrate and pursue wholeheartedly companies that are blessing the world, that are adding value to the world, that are promoting the global common good.
So we were praying about what we should do in terms of how do we help Christians invest money. And there were just principles that we saw in the Bible. And one of the principles that we saw was avoiding ill-gotten gain. Proverbs 1 has a whole passage about avoiding ill-gotten gain and not sharing a purse with people that plunder. So early on, we created a kind of an avoidance list. So we said, okay, these are definitely problem areas. Christians would not or should not profit and partner with businesses that do these types of things.
Investing is ownership, company ownership. It's a very helpful metaphor for thinking about what's happening when you invest. You're owning specific businesses. These businesses are not buildings. They're a network of relationships that impact our neighbors. Capital should be a servant in the world, that it should be something that creates and enlarges flourishing. Back in the early 1600s, we got the introduction of the stock and the bond as a financing mechanism for business. But what happened is that the early stocks and bonds were tremendously successful. Very, very successful, and many people made fortunes. And word about the fortunes of those early investments spread very rapidly. And what happened is, gradually, people began to pay less and less attention to what these stocks and bonds, what company was behind them. And so there was basically the Christian community began to be disturbed by this phenomenon that capital would be going toward things without a lot of intentionality and thought behind it. And this culminated in John Wesley, who was an English minister in the 1700s, preaching a sermon to his congregation called The Use of Money, where he dealt very directly with how we should be thinking about investing our money. And so that was really, in many ways, the beginning of the responsible investing movement that we know today. In fact, secular historians say that sermon was the starting place of the entire movement. It began as a Christian movement. And it was really driven by this desire to not separate the returns of investing from the impact of investing, but to consider them both with one mind. I think one of the things that stands out in the Eventide culture is that the reason we are gathered together and working together is to pursue a sense of calling or a mission together.
A lot of my colleagues are of the Christian faith, and I think that's awesome. I'm personally of the Jewish faith, and I think there are a lot of shared values. I was born in Ukraine just before the fall of the Soviet Union to a Jewish father and a Russian mother, and we left Ukraine, which was our home, because one, we saw better economic opportunities elsewhere after the fall of the Soviet Union, and two, because there was still anti-Semitism in Ukraine, and we didn't feel safe being there. So what I have here now in my life in the U.S., thanks to my parents and my grandparents, is a life of, boundless opportunity, and that's what I want to try to give to people through my career and also through my giving and volunteering. Opportunities to be successful, to have a fulfilling life that sustains financially and spiritually, and also a place where people feel like they belong.
Eventide's approach to values-based investing is grounded in the belief that humankind was created with intrinsic dignity, value, and worth. Business 360 is the process by which we look to and embrace companies that we believe God would say, yes, you should profit from that because it is producing what we call human flourishing. So we take a holistic approach that I think is also unique, that's really just rooted in this expression of desiring to perpetuate what God says is good.
We in the West, we have such privilege. We have no idea how privileged we are. And with all of the privilege comes great responsibility. And my contention is that given how much capital we have, there's no society even remotely close to where we are in the United States today. And so how is it that we don't view that as a privilege, as an opportunity to take that wealth and talents that God has given us and deploy that to serve others in ways that are in keeping with our fundamental mandate to love our neighbor?
John Wesley preached, make all you can, to give all you can, but make all you can without hurting yourself or your neighbor, in body or in soul. We often only say make all you can to give all you can, But the other side of that equation is how you make your money, how you go about conducting business. What are the types of businesses we even start? Even going back to the book of Genesis, when God creates, He calls good over and over the thing that He creates. So if He created us in His image, and if work is given to us even before the fall happened, question is, what types of work, what types of businesses, and what type of investing should we be engaging in?
We're really coming up against an industry of finance that has been trained to think about things according to the story of the world. And I think we've spent much less time reflecting on God's story for work, for business, for investing, and really saying, how can we bring this story into our lives? How can we become a part of God's story? How can we live that out? Only then, I think, are we going to see a significant movement in the church. Only then are we going to see people being very excited about investment opportunities like Eventide or others. When you look at the total capital that Christians have at their disposal and how much of that is deployed in manners that are sensitive to faith issues, I mean, we're looking at certainly less than 1%, but it is a tiny, tiny percentage right now. But the time is now, and those who join us now in this endeavor, I think will experience the joys of what it's like to start a movement from the very beginning. And so it depends on that interplay of the common good and the redemptive good. And I think that all the things that we're doing here are hopefully in service of this goal of getting the church to a place of health holistically across all different dimensions, not just personal dealings with sin, but financially dealing with our vocational capital, getting the church in a healthy place so that we can begin to do what God has called us to do with delivering the Great Commission to the ends of the earth. So that's my big dream, and I hope to play at least a small part in that dream.